Okay, welcome to you all to our webinar today. My name is Tom Shields, and today we're going to be talking about being resilient and keeping well. And this is very much a departure from our usual topics here at Pimbrook, where we talk about accounts and payroll and software. But it's been something of a challenging year, as we all know, and we wanted to do something that might help people through that. So we were delighted to get the opportunity to invite David Delaney to share his knowledge and wisdom on this subject. Um, Wellness has been advocated by many recently, but David is an old hand on this and been involved in it for the past 10 years or so. He has a master's degree in mindfulness intervention from UCD, and his first book, Reclaim Your Past and Reset Your Future, has just been published on Livy Press. And he currently teaches mindfulness and meditation classes in UCD. So we hope and think you will find this both interesting and useful. Just a couple of notes before I introduce Dave. All attendees are muted, but we welcome questions, and you can use that. You can submit questions using the chat button at the bottom of your screen there. And we also are recording this session, and we'll post it up on our website afterwards. So without any more, we'll get started, and I'll introduce Dave there. If you want to unmute Dave there and come in. Sorry, I think Dave was just doing a problem there. No, Dave, we can't hear you there. You'll have to mute there. That's it.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for that, Tom. My name's Dave, and for the next maybe 35, 40 minutes, we're going to go on a journey together to maybe explore some questions that we could ask about our own lives and how we could improve them to have more joy and fun and meaning. And hopefully, if I do my job right, at the end of this, you might be more open to exploring some of those questions that we'll work through. We'll go through in the next little while. But what I'd like you to do is, as Tom said, the camera's off, so you can kick back, relax. You don't have to remember anything because we'll have a recording and we'll send around some notes. What we're going to do today, I picked 5 topics that I thought might be helpful, particularly the year that we've had. So we're going to go over you and your brain, the 5 pillars of well-being, stress, how to recognize it and manage it, relationships, and communication. So just before we start, what I'd like you to do is just try something for me. If you wouldn't mind maybe looking around the room that you're in and pick an object. It could be a cushion, a chair, a picture. Doesn't matter what the object is. I'd like you to just find an object and just notice its shape. Don't judge it. Don't worry about what it does. Just notice its coloring. Maybe notice any texture that it has. Notice maybe how the light bounces off it. Just notice the position in the room, the space that this object is taking up. And now maybe bring the attention to your feet. And if it's okay with you, I'd like you to gently squeeze your feet and toes and allow them to stretch out. Gently squeeze your feet and toes, allow them stretch out. Just gently squeeze your feet and toes and allow them stretch out. maybe taking a moment just to notice if we're holding a lot of tension, just unnecessary holding, just maybe give the body permission to let go a little bit and just to kick back and just to listen to my words and see where they land. So the first component we're going to discuss is you and your brain. And it's a really important topic because most of us think that the brain is just one thing, and whatever it does, it affects us, and we can have an impact on how that works. So I have a question for you. Do you think that your brain works for you? That your brain works against you? Or maybe does your brain sometimes work for you and sometimes work against you? Well, if you answered any of those, if you took any of those answers, actually it's not correct, because the brain isn't actually concerned with how our thinking affects us. So if we have thoughts that cause us to be anxious, worried, stressed, the brain isn't concerned with that. Our brains are only concerned with what we think about most often. So if Dave thinks last week, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm no good at this, I'm not worth it, I'm just, I don't deserve to have kindness. And I have that last week and yesterday and today. My brain will go, oh, Dave likes thinking about this, so let's make it more effective and efficient to think that way. But equally, if I last week noticed the sound of the birds, the clouds drifting across a blue sky, maybe the heat of the sun on my face, and I bring my attention to that when it happens, well, then my brain, the channels will go, hey, Dave likes thinking like this, so let's make it more effective and efficient. So it can be helpful to know how our brains work, because the brain throws up thoughts all the time, but most of the time they're not helpful or relevant. They often drag us into the past, project us into the future, and we miss out then on now. Now, for many people, when we're talking like this, it can sound just like words. So let's make it practical. Let's do a demonstration. So what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes, if that's okay. And for the next 15, 20 odd seconds, I'd like you to instruct your brain not to give you any thoughts. You'd like to have no thoughts. So in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. Now, unless we're the Dalai Lama and have had unbelievable amount of training, we're going to have had thoughts. Even if it's something like, oh, I'm going to focus on my foot, that's still a thought. And you might notice that they pop up nearly straight away. And they often pull us and distract us away from where we are. And it can be helpful to start recognizing that, because we can do something about it. So now let's play with this. Let's try it again, only this time we're going to try and keep thinking. So again, I'd like you to close your eyes if you opened them. And for the next 15 or 20 seconds, I'd like you to keep thinking. Now, don't make up lists of things to make it easy. Just have a thought, then if it goes away, try and fill it with another one and another one and another one. So keep thinking. So on 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, and relax, and you can open your eyes. So you might have noticed that actually keeping thinking all the time takes a lot of effort and energy, because the brain is only 2% of the body mass, but it can use up to 25% of the energy and resources we give it. And often, most of us have spinning heads that are full of thoughts all the time. And that can cause us to be more tired, just struggling, exhausted. And it can be helpful when we can learn to, to slow the mind down, to have less energy being used up by the brain and making us feel calm and have more connection and maybe more fun in our lives. So it's good to know how our brains work and that thoughts just pop up, but we can learn to choose whether we follow those thoughts or not, because a lot of them aren't helpful and they aren't true. So that kind of brings us to the 5 pillars of well-being. So the 5 pillars are sleep and rest, exercise, diet, social interaction, and self-awareness. So if we can improve each of these by even 1%, they have a corresponding knock-on effect to the others. So often we're tired, we're pulled and dragged, and sleep and rest are really important. And many of us have this crash boom cycle where we push ourselves until we're exhausted. But it can be really helpful to, during the day, consciously take a few moments to reset, to bring down the stress level, to bring down that busy, busy mind. So I thought it might be helpful to give you a tool that I often use, and it's called the 3-step breathing space. So to do this, if you'd like to keep your eyes open, you can. If you prefer to close your eyes, and just take a moment to notice the mental activity that's in your head right now. Is there busyness or is it calm? Are you thinking about the past or the future? Just don't change it, just noticing what's there. And maybe taking a moment to notice what emotions you're experiencing right now. Because we all have emotions all the time, but usually we don't recognize them until they're extreme. So just noticing what can you label the thought? Maybe it's interest, it's excitement, maybe it's a little bit of anxiousness, nervousness. Doesn't matter what the thought is or the emotion is, just notice it. Now I'd like you to place one of your hands on your tummy, on your belly. Bring your attention to your breathing. And maybe trying to breathe in through and out through the nose. Allowing the abdomen, the belly area, to expand on the inhale and contract on the exhale. Just noticing what it's like to breathe in this moment. Just simple one breath, just noticing an inhale and an exhale. Just breathing, nothing else to do. Now you can place your hand back on your knee or your lap, and this time we're going to bring the attention to the whole body, the entire body, from the top of the head to the tips of the toes. Noticing the face and chest, belly, quads, shins, top of the feet, the back of the head and shoulder blades, and maybe the lower back and buttocks and hamstrings, calves, and the sides of the body, the shoulders and ribs and hips and sides of the legs. Just take a moment to tune into this entire body. Lovely. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes. So what that is an opportunity to reset, to be able to reduce the energy levels, increase our energy levels. And that's what we can do every day. So rather than crash boom cycle and getting exhausted and then needing to crash and rest, we can go through the day. Maybe every time you put on the kettle, just take a moment, check in your thoughts and emotions, breathe, and feel your body. And we can do this in 5 or 10 seconds, but it just brings us back. And exercise, when we can go for a walk even and notice something we haven't noticed before in our area, it can be really, really helpful. So the next time you go for a walk, even if it's on your own road, maybe trying to notice something you never noticed before. You know, number 5 got a new car, or there's a nice flower box in number 14. And it helps to just bring us out of our internal focus and noticing what's around us in the present moment. And diet can be helpful. The more heavy things that we eat, if we're having our glass of wine every night, you know, it can be habit rather than enjoyable, where sometimes it can be fun to save it till Friday or Saturday and it gives us something to look forward to. And the more we are rested and the more we kind of exercise a little bit, the slightly better our diet, even by 1%, we're more likely to be fun and to be open and to be connected with people around us, and are more attractive to people around us. And the more self-aware we are, just noticing when we're anxious, when we're stressed, where we are, which we'll do in the next section, then we can choose to do something about it. We can have a choice. That's what most of this kind of meditation, mindfulness, awareness is about, is creating those choices. So that kind of brings us on to stress. So stress is really important and it's really helpful. So if we need to, you know, in the past, if there was a lion coming to eat us, we needed to be able to have the energy to run away or to fight it. You know, if there's a car coming towards you, you need to have the sudden ability to jump out of the way. But the problem is, often in this modern society, we have a constant level of stress. Work. The brain can't distinguish between the danger of a lion coming to eat us, or maybe having to finish a report, or having bills coming in, or having to do whatever our list of things is, and the challenging things we have in our life. So unless we consciously do something to bring us into that rest and digest, that calming part of the body, then we're kind of stuck in the fight and flight. And again, we're not getting that opportunity to fully rest. It takes energy and effort to hold that tension. And when we can start giving ourselves permission just to let go a little bit, it can be really powerful and it can be really positive. So the 3-step breathing space that we just did is a really good way of doing that. And we can take time out in the day. So maybe take a moment to think, the last time you were in a shower, you were having a shower, how many people did you have in there with you? You might snigger, but if you think about it, most of us, when we get into the shower, we're thinking, oh, I must do this for Tom, and I have to finish that report for Stephanie, and I have to do this list for Mary. And suddenly we've got all these people there. But how would it be to, the next time getting into the shower, just say, no, this is my private space. Feel the water. Feel the sense of it on the body. Notice the fragrance of the soap or the shampoo. And just enjoy that space for yourself. Because the more time we choose to create those spaces, the less anxious we are, the less snappy we'll be, the less triggered we become, and the more capable we are of understanding other people and being able to recognize when we're getting stressed. Gives us the choice to say, I'm going to go away, even if I have to hide in the toilet for a couple of minutes, and just do that maybe 3-minute breathing space. How is my head? Is it busy? Is it calm? What thoughts am I having? What emotion am I feeling right now? And we're not trying to change them, we're just noticing. And every emotion is valuable because it's telling us something. If we're sad, if we're anxious, if we're worried, okay, but what can we do about it? How can we help reduce that anxiety? And again, going for a walk is a really positive way. And just noticing what's around us, tuning into the sound of the birds, the sound of the children playing, feeling the heat of the sun on our face, the sensation of the heels and the toes as we walk can be really, really helpful and just help to bring us out of that more stress space. So usually when we're getting stressed, we can notice the tummy getting tighter, the shoulders coming up around our ears, the breathing is shorter and sharper. So it can be helpful just to be able to take a deeper breath, to breathe that little bit deeper and connect back in with our own bodies. So that's stress. So the next thing we might look at is relationships. And the most important relationship we have is our relationship with ourselves. And when we can better understand our relationship with ourselves, we're better placed to understand others. Every time you get onto a plane, the first thing they'll say is put on your mask first. Because if you don't, you can become part of the problem. So it can be really helpful just to know where we are. And maybe something that would help that is, I'd like you to consider someone who has been good to you. Someone who's had your best interest at heart, like a grandmother or a mother or a best friend. And I'd like you to just think of the qualities that they have, or the qualities of someone you really admire have. And often there'll be things like steady, have your best interest at heart, fun, honest, kind, caring, supportive. And often we share those emotions and those qualities with other people. But how would it be to turn those towards ourselves? And for many of us, when we go to do that, there's a sense of resistance. And it's learning to reduce that resistance, that it's okay to be kind. It's really important to be patient with ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, to be compassionate, to allow us to have more fun, to have more joy. Because the better placed we are, the better everybody's life around us will be. So relationships are really important. And then extending that out to others. Like I know in my life, if somebody says something to me and I go to respond in a bit of a snappy way, I'm irritated or defensive, I now I ask myself, am I tired or am I stressed? because often my answer is actually nothing got to do with the other person, that it's about me. And equally, when somebody else snaps at me, I now am better placed to stop and look and go, often that snappiness is because they're stressed, because they're anxious, because there's other things going on. And it's learning not to take it as personal, not getting caught up in their stress. So if I come on to this webinar today and I start giving out and moaning and shouting and roaring, and you might go, well, that's disgraceful. How dare he treat us like that? We came on to listen to him. And if you do that, then you're caught up in my stress. But if we turn it and go, wow, that person seems really stressed or anxious or uptight, it allows us not to get caught up in the other person's stuff, the baggage. And a lot of the stress that we have, that we hold, is other people's stuff. So I'd like to tell you a story. It's one of my favorite stories. It's called The Broken Pot. And in India, there was a water bearer who had a pole, and there was two big pots at the end. And every day she'd go down to the river and fill the pots up. And one of them had a crack in it. And when she'd walk back along the path to her mistress's house, one pot only was half full. And this went on for a long time. And finally, the pot got the courage to speak, to communicate with the servant, and said, look, throw me away. I'm a broken pot. It's no good. All your effort is going to waste. Look at that other perfect pot. It's amazing. It's full, but I'm only half full. Get rid of me. And the servant smiled and said, the next time we go to the river, I want you to notice what it's like walking back to the house. So she went down the next day, filled up the two pots. And as they walked back, the broken pot noticed all the flowers on their side of the path. And when she put down the pots and spoke to the broken pot, she said, what did you notice? He said, yeah, the flowers and blooms were lovely, but I'm still damaged and broken. And she smiled and she goes, I know about your flaws. And that's why I planted all those seeds. And that's why there's beautiful fragrance and beauty in my mistress's house and in the garden. So in our relationships with ourselves or others, like we're all vulnerable. We all have insecurities. We're all scared sometimes and frightened. Like 2 years ago, I lost my sight, and to the extent now that I have a guide dog, I'm blind. I'm a broken pot. Is it difficult? Yeah, absolutely. Is it challenging? Of course it is. But what I started to notice is I've moved away from identifying with the broken pot, and I'm trying to identify more with the compassion of the servant. Because I know that if I was cured tomorrow, I wouldn't be a perfect human being. I'd still have insecurities and flaws and vulnerabilities. And that's okay. We all do. And when we can understand and accept that in ourselves, and we can accept that for others, how much richer the world is. We stop trying to compete with everybody and we start sharing. So it can be really helpful. So that's one of my favorite stories, and it's helpful to be able to notice in our relationships. Yes, we're all broken pots, but can we be and have the compassion of the servant to be able to recognize somebody's flaws, but to turn them into something wonderful? And I know that my capacity to be able to do these talks has deepened because I now have more empathy and compassion for others. So that brings us to the fifth topic, which is communication. Now, in lockdown, in COVID times, many of us, it's been challenging because we're pushed together, we're isolated, we don't have the same opportunities to get out and unwind. And there's a lovely Zen story of the four cups. And one day a novice went in to talk to the abbot, and the abbot had four cups in front of him and a pot of tea. And the first cup was nearly full, and the second cup had a crack in it, and the third cup was upside down, and the fourth cup just sat there. And the abbot picked up the pot and started pouring the tea into the first cup, but of course it had immediately started overfilling. And then he started pouring the tea into the second cup, but it was cracked, so it just went straight through. And then he poured it onto the third cup, which was upside down, and the tea just went everywhere, but didn't go into the cup. And then he poured the tea into the last cup, which took the tea, and he handed it to the novice. So how does this story relate? How is it not just words? How does this story relate to communication? Communication is really important. And there are four kind of main communication styles. And if you're up for it, Tom, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Dave.
How you doing, Tom? All right, Tom, are you up for a bit of role play?
Oh, go on. Okay.
Okay, so Tom, so maybe I'd like you to ask me. So say, how come, Dave, every time we go out for a drink, you never buy a round?
Good question. Good question.
Okay, so off you go.
Okay, Dave, how come every time we go out for a drink, you never buy a drink? Or sorry, you never buy a round?
Oh yeah, God, going out, that would be fantastic. Yeah, because I know I'm really stressed at the moment. I'd love to go out. Oh God, imagine having something to eat. And it'd be great to have something to eat because like work is really busy. And God, I'd love to go on holidays too. And so that kind of response is an example of the first cup that's mostly full. So you've asked me a question, but I'm so preoccupied in my own stuff that I can't take it on board. That it just, boom, it fills. I can't hold it. And that's a really good example of the first cup. So how about asking me again, Tom?
Right. Dave, when we go out for a drink, you never seem to buy your own round. Why is that?
Tom, I'm delighted you asked me that. And, I think it's really important that we do talk about, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, hello. Yeah, how are you, Mum? Yeah, I'll be out for Sunday dinner. Anyway, Tom, yeah, look, it's great to talk to you. And my door's always open. And I'm delighted we had this conversation. So thanks very much. Right, so there's an example of maybe the second cup, the cup with the crack in it. So I might even believe in myself that I've listened to Tom, but I haven't. He spoke. It went in and straight back out. It never landed. What's the phrase? In one ear and out the other. So go again, Tom.
Dave, every time you go out, you never buy a round.
I'm glad you said that because how come every time we go out, you make us go to the most expensive pubs, and every time you want to buy a drink, you buy something with an umbrella in it and they're really expensive, so it's your fault. So there's an example of the turned over cup. It's that defensive, that trigger, that directly pushing it back, not hearing at all what Tom's trying to say and just pushing back. So how about once more, Tom?
Right, for the last time, Dave, we go out for a drink a couple of times and you never buy a round. Why is that?
That's okay. Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't realize. Well, how would it be, Tom, maybe if I bought the first one and maybe the third one and I'll probably only have maybe 4 drinks. So would that be okay? Do you think that would work? Would that be helpful?
Great.
Only if they don't have umbrellas on them.
Fair enough.
But now we've had an engagement where it's about getting the best outcome from the conversation. It's not about a win. And many of us get stuck into this win-win state. But in our interactions, it's best to have a situation where what's the best outcome for everybody? Because if we have an unbalanced relationships where we're always trying to win or we always feel threatened, It's not helpful. So how can we recognize when people can't hear us, when they're not in that space? Noticing when they're defensive and not taking it personal, because a lot of the time it's not about us. And the funny thing is, many of us here are probably thinking right now, oh, well, I know Mary is the first cup and Johnny's the second cup and Frankie's the third cup. But the reality is every single one of us have been each of those cups. And it's being able to recognize when people aren't really present and helping them to become present. And also the same with ourselves. So back to that 3-step breathing space. The more we can do that, the better placed we are to do it. So just to summarize, so far we've gone through you and your brain, so learning a bit more about how the brain works and thoughts. We did the 5 pillars of well-being, and changing them even by 1% can really have a big knock-on effect. We've talked about stress, how to recognize it and manage it. We've talked about relationships and how to improve them, and communication. And if we start looking at those areas, it can really make a big dramatic impact on our lives. But personally, I'm starting to notice that one of the most wonderful things in life now is just the capacity to have some fun. And if anybody, it's been able to be, we have a sign over our staircase, and it says, be honest, be kind, be silly. And being silly is probably one of the most wonderful things we can be, like reconnecting back to that childhood feeling. And, it can be helpful to go back and listen to the sort of music we listened to as a teenager, because that person is still there. It's still inside us. We just suppressed it. How can we be more like that child running around the garden trying to chase a butterfly for no other reason that we can? And for anybody who'd like to, I'd like to share a secret Taoist practice of silliness. So, Tom.
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have the ability to unmute everybody?
Let me check that now. I don't think I can on this setup.
Okay, don't worry about it. Okay, well, we'll do it. And maybe anybody who'd like to feel that sense of openness and joy would like to join in. So here's the secret Taoist practice. So what I'd like you to do is bring your right hand up. And I'd like you to take your index finger and point it towards the ceiling. And then what I'd like you to do is take a nice deep breath and bring the finger horizontally and bring it towards your mouth. And I'd like you to do this. You ready, Tom?
I'm ready.
All right. Look.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you for making me look very foolish.
And that's really important, because we spend so much time putting up these fences and walls, and sometimes it's just about being silly and being kind and having fun. So I hope that was helpful. I know that there's stuff you might have noticed, the t-shirt, the Mindful Spark, the stuff up on YouTube and on Instagram that will go through all the stuff we've covered here. So as I said, I hope that was helpful, and thank you.
That was great, Dave. Thanks very much. And we were delighted to be able to bring your insights to a couple of people there. I hope you all found that interesting and could take something away from it. We'll take a few questions if anyone has put it into the chat box there. I'll have a look at that now. But just to remind you what David mentioned there, you can contact Dave if you have any questions himself on the email is up there on the screen, the mindfulspark@gmail.com. As David mentioned as well, he's got a YouTube channel called the Mindful Spark, and there's got a lot of videos there on little demonstrations and that. And as we said before, his book has just been published and it's available in all the main online channels, but also in the main bookshops as well. And it's called The Mindful Spark: Reclaim Your Past, Reset Your Future. So we'll just take a look at any questions that may have come in there. We got one here, Dave. My mind is always busy. Any suggestions?
And that's a super question. And yeah, again, it's back to this choice thing we're talking about. So it can be really helpful. We talked about that 3-minute breathing space. Every time maybe we put on the kettle, have an anchor point and say, I'm going to do that. So maybe 3 times a day. And the more we take the time to do those activities, the less busy the head will be. To going for a walk and feeling our feet on the ground as we walk, or noticing something outside, those reduce the busyness in the head. And there's some good videos I think I have, and Happiness is in Your Own Hands on my YouTube channel, that can give simple techniques that we don't have time to go into now, that can be really helpful to reduce the busyness in our heads and give us so much more energy and ability to connect and be happy.
And someone has asked this as well, but also for myself, Dave, that's all covered in the book as well, is it?
Yes, yes, okay. And a lot more.
Right. Someone else has talked about meditation here. I've been told that good meditation can only be done by stopping all your thoughts, but I can never do that. Is it possible? Is that right?
No, I would dismiss that immediately, because we always have thoughts. But what happens is if we try and suppress anything, it comes back even more. So thoughts we resist tend to persist. So what we can do, and again, there's a video on my channel about recognizing what sort of thoughts we have. Because we talked about the thoughts come up, but we can start recognizing what they are. And we can redirect our focus. So don't worry about suppressing or not having thoughts. Only be concerned with, well, all I'm going to do now is feel my feet. So squeeze your feet. Squeeze your feet and toes. Squeeze your feet and toes. Maybe do it with your hands. Squeeze the hands. Place the hand on the belly and breathe. And when we do that, we're directing our attention. And the more we direct our own focus and attention, the stronger it gets. It's like going to the gym. So when we start this, we're busy, busy, busy all the time. And that's okay. That's how our brains work. But the more time we take to just have those moments of spaciousness, the quieter and the less distracting our thoughts are. We still have them, but they don't affect us. They don't cause us to behave. So it's not that they're gone, it's that we just learn not to be concerned with them, because they're usually not helpful or relevant. And again, in the book, it goes into this in much greater detail.
Okay. Someone has just they just put into the chat, broken sleep, ... I presume.
Absolutely. And again, in the book, I have a chapter on I go into the sleep and restlessness. And it's what we often do, and there's lots of reasons for this, and there's some good stuff on YouTube, but I know what I did was, when I woke up, rather than going, oh no, I'm awake now and I'll be awake for ages and I'll be tired in the morning, what I do is I go, right, I'm going to now do the 3-minute, the breathing space. I'm going to do a body scan. And I know that when I go into that semi-meditative, mindful place, the body is actually in rest and digest mode. So it's repairing. So even though I might be awake, I won't be tired in the morning. And it changes it from anxiety to be able to go, great, I'm awake now. This is a great opportunity. I'm not distracted. I'm going to do some breathing techniques. Another good thing that I found useful after a few minutes of doing some breathing techniques or body scans or whatever works for you best. And again, I touch on this in my videos on YouTube, the Reclaim Your Past, Reset Your Future. There can be lovely things where you can actually lie there and try and keep your eyes open. So the body is often paradoxical. It's by trying to keep the eyes open, but allowing the body to be soft. Allow the body to feel light, but your eyelids are heavy, but you can't close them. Don't close your eyes. Whatever you do, because they're getting heavy, don't close them. You have to stay awake. And when we do that and flip it, the eyelids do get heavier. And often they start closing and closing, and it's amazing how we can drop off to sleep. But you can't force yourself to go to sleep. It just has to happen. So sometimes when we try and stay awake, it actually helps us to go to sleep.
Okay. There's a few more questions, and quite a few people are still on, Dave. Are you okay to keep going? I know we're going over a little bit, but we'll keep going if that's okay, Dave. You say when your time is up. Someone has it's probably talking about the role play you did and the cups. What to do if someone is not listening?
And that's a great question. And the first thing I often do now is I remember when I was not listening to people. And it can be helpful to kind of identify what's causing the not listening. So if somebody's so distracted and caught up in their own heads, then you know that you want to kind of bring them back into the present moment, into the space. So it can be helpful just to start, if you need to have a conversation about one thing, don't jump straight in. Because like pouring the tea, you're just wasting your energy. So it's bringing them back in to be able to get them to settle. Have, maybe sit down, have the chat. When they're not in the middle of doing things, it can be helpful maybe when they're not immediately coming home from work, or, wait until they're having a cup of tea and they're sitting down and you go, okay, now's the time I can more likely to engage. And it can be helpful sometimes to even let them know, but in a non-aggressive way. Because if we say, you're not listening to me, Tom, you're not listening, Tom's defenses are going to come straight up. But what if we were to say, wow, Tom, you seem quite distracted today. I was hoping to talk about buying you drinks with umbrellas in them. We can bring Tom carefully in, because remember, if Tom's distracted, it's nothing got to do with me. And if he's maybe the cup with the crack in it, it's going, sometimes I want to listen to you because I want to hear what you have to say. And it'd be also nice then maybe if we can both hear each other. So if we make it about, Tom, you just pretend to listen to me, but you don't. Again, it's creating the defensiveness in Tom. So how can we bring Tom in to go, hey, I noticed that maybe I could listen to you a bit more. Maybe we could do that, because I notice sometimes that you seem to be there, but you're not. So it's learning to do that in a calm way, but we often engage in those things when we're stressed. Remember those two questions I asked myself, am I tired, am I stressed? Because if you're those things, it's not the time to have a conversation, because you're already going to more than likely trigger the other person. So it's not trying to get caught up in their baggage. And when somebody doesn't want to talk to you at all, like the cup, again, it's trying to play with that and figure out why, be aware of what's behind it. And again, when we don't take it as personally, we're able to sit back like the broken pot. The servant can look and see what's going on, more than just a crack, which is only on the surface. So it's remembering that we're often like that, and being gentle and kind with ourselves. But even if we're angry with somebody else, trying to come from a point of compassion. The most important thing is the best outcome for everybody, not just us, not just them. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, okay. Someone just came back. I think it was the person that asked about the broken sleep. They said,
Yeah.
"Great, I will try that." Someone else has asked that you mentioned you've done a master's in mindfulness. Could you talk about that a little bit? Where and what did that entail?
The master's was in UCD and it was mindfulness intervention. So it focuses primarily on a thing called MBSR and MBCT, which is mindfulness based stress reduction and mindfulness based cognitive therapy. And they were initially done for people who fell through the gaps in hospitals for pain and they weren't healing, they weren't getting better, and a lot of them were in physical pain. And most of us are in pain of emotional, physical, relationship. Like we all have stress. So it was to try and bring things into the day to change how we relate to our suffering. And it was a part-time 2-year course by night. And it was interesting. Now I have my own background in Taoism. So mindfulness is only one piece of the puzzle. And for all of us, it's kind of trying to find programs that help us. And I did find it useful giving the 8-week, teaching the 8-week courses of mindfulness based stress reduction to help others to, to again just reconnect with themselves and identify slightly differently with their own suffering, like I did with my blindness. I mean, we all have challenges, but I know that if I could see tomorrow, I wouldn't be a perfect human being. And my wife can absolutely categorically tell you that that's true. So
Right.
it's changing how we relate to things. So I hope that was.
Yeah, and so I think that same person followed up with, and the classes you give, are they in that, or is it something?
No,
As in, are you teaching now the masters? I think is what they're asking.
what I've done about 5 years ago is I developed my own system that I felt was more beneficial to most people who are working, who have jobs, because the MBSR is 2.5 hours every week, plus an hour's homework every day, plus a full day Saturday. So it's a
Yeah.
huge commitment. And it it jumps in very quickly. And I think it could be improved. And what I did is I tried to teach in classes, find out what worked best for people. And over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, I put together, and again in my book, I called it Reclaim Your Past, Reset Your Future. And I kind of have a course that's 50 minutes long, 8 of them. And again, the videos on the YouTube channel, the entire course is up there. And in the future, I will be doing more courses, but they're more, I'm trying to take what's good in many systems and build a new one that's suitable for today and for people who are busy and who are working.
Okay, very good. There's a question here. I'll read it out as verbatim. I hope I'm not being too personal, but would you say you got into mindfulness because of your blindness, or and if so, has it helped? Or were you what did that come before? Were you into mindfulness and well-being beforehand?
No, I've been I've been practicing kind of Taoist meditation for about 20 years now. And I got into it from Tai Chi and actually from martial arts. So I have a black belt in Taekwondo. And I had a very, very busy mind. My mind was always spinning. I always has thoughts. I had, after a while, I realized I didn't think I was worth or I was good enough. because I'm a blind person in an able-bodied world. And I was trying to compete with everybody. And to do that, I felt I had to be better, push, strive. And what I've realized is that's a creation in my own mind. That the only person we need to compete with or we need to make happy is ourselves. Because if we're happy, then everything else is okay. And we can all look at what we don't have. Every one of us can do that. And if we do that, we will suffer. Because there's always somebody out there who's taller than us, more beautiful than us, more clever, better at teaching mindfulness. It doesn't matter what it is. But when we can just be comfortable with our own skin, and I was afraid of being quiet because of the fears in my own self. And when I learned, like the broken pot, to realize, yeah, I'm scared, but it's okay to be scared. I feel pressure. It's okay to feel pressure. It's okay. And once I started moving into that in the meditation mindfulness space, my life started getting better. So to answer the question, I got into it from Tai Chi, from martial arts. There was a meditative, because when we're calmer and we're more relaxed, we become better sparers. And from that, I moved into a much more spiritual area where I realized the value of just sharing with other people and sharing my own suffering, because then it has more value, because we all suffer, and that's okay. I hope that answered the question somewhat.
Yeah, just my own view, Dave, in just hearing you talk on a couple of things there. So you've wrote a book, you've done a master's, you work full time, and you're partially sighted. I have to say that I'm not feeling great about myself anymore. Fair play, fair play. One question here is, if we can keep going, it's what do you think? Mindfulness seems to have been. Sorry, mindfulness seems to be out there a lot. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing? I think that means, it seems to be quite popular in the last couple of years. Even before COVID, I think that's what the question is talking about. Is it too much now?
The answer to the question is, it's brilliant in one sense, and unfortunately, it's been hijacked in another sense. So I think finally there's an acceptance that everybody is tired at times, that everybody suffers at times, that we all have loss and we all have vulnerabilities and fears. And anything that can bring that up front, that we don't have to pretend to be perfect, is really valuable, is really helpful. Now, I think it's been watered down. People are now doing a weekend course and suddenly they're teaching mindfulness.
Yeah.
But mindfulness normally would have only been taught after 20 years of practice. And mindfulness is only page one. Meditation is everything that happens after that. So we could change. I don't use the word mindfulness very much anymore. I try to use now resilience, well-being, self-awareness. So it doesn't have some of the negative connotations that maybe mindfulness has. I think it's an overused word and it's thrown around a lot. But
yeah,
again, anything that can help, I think, is important. So it's a yes and no answer.
Yeah, no, and that's I think that's fair. That's fairly reasonable. I think probably some people have been bombarded with mindfulness, and it nearly becomes a stress on them to I've now to be more mindful. Yeah.
And I think that's where we're stuck in our heads.
Yeah.
You don't forget the word mindfulness. Go for a walk, notice something you haven't noticed before. Then that is mindful without having to try and be. If you're trying to be mindful, then you're not going to do it because you're stuck in your head.
Yeah, good point.
3-step breathing space, go for your walk. You don't need to do anything else. Your life will start being better. And be silly.
Yes, once again, thank you for having me do that in front of some very important clients.
You're very welcome.
We'll leave it there, Dave. I just have to say there is other questions, and there's been a lot of thank yous that have come through on the chat box there. So I'll add mine to that, Dave,
If
and I'll
anyone
thank.
wants to send me an email at themindfulspark.ie, I'd be delighted to share and answer any questions anybody has.
It's at themindfulspark.ie or at gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. I have that up on the
I'd
the
be
board
delighted
there.
if you didn't answer any questions. Send them on to me, and I'd be very happy to share.
That's terrific, Dave. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to thank all our attendees that came onto this webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you take something away, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be safe.